It means to be Black British. I think this is an interesting one because it's kind of you're like a fusion of two different identities and cultures, and that's what makes you who you are. And I think even just being Black British in general is like a fusion of loads of like African influences, Caribbean influences, and just living in England. And then that's where you get Black British from. Leading up to medicine, I had just done the English school system the usual way. Went to primary school, finished at 6, went to secondary school, finished that, went through to sixth form, following on from sixth form, got my grades, and they were sufficient enough to take me to medical school, which is where I am at the moment. For me, the epiphany kind of came at the moment when I realized that it's the study of human beings and understanding when a certain person is unwell, understanding how a person operates when they're well, and then following on from that, using this knowledge to then know how to treat a person when they're unwell. It was just so fascinating to me, and then here we are. I think my university experience has been a very interesting one. I think it's something that I kind of didn't expect because I didn't really know other Black medical students prior to coming to university, or even just Black doctors in general. So it's almost like my expectations were based off other people. And I think one thing, especially with university, who you are kind of molds your university experience, and all of the expectations I had of university were from people who were not like me. So then when I got to university, these expectations that I had almost didn't live up to be true. And at the start of university, I kind of struggled because I was riding like all of my hopes and everything on those experiences that those people had. But in general, my experience so far, for me personally, has been enjoyable. It comes with its challenges, a lot of them. But I think it's those challenges which kind of make you realize why you keep going sometimes, because getting out of those challenges kind of gives you the energy to propel you further, kind of thing. I think the challenge that it's almost like an internal challenge that I had is almost feeling inferior, feeling like you don't belong. Even though one thing that I kind of grew to tell myself is that I actually earned my place on this course. I have every right to be here and every right to do the best I can. But when you kind of get there in first year, especially for me, I just felt like, I wasn't meant to be here. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge for me was almost feeling like an imposter the whole time in my first year at university. But once I overcame that challenge, I can't say I've entirely overcame it, but I'm definitely in a better place than I was last year. So Mind the Gap is a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms in Black and brown skin. The actual work, the ideas and the theories and the curiosity for the work came a long time before I even got to medical school. Something that I grew up and I was almost aware of, and just so prevalent in the community that I would see people going to GP, being misdiagnosed, being almost mistreated by the healthcare system at times. And it was just an awareness that I had, but I didn't know why those things happened, or I even thought to an extent that maybe it's just on an individual basis, so it's almost like a you problem. And then I got to university and I realized that we weren't taught how to identify stuff on darker skins. And in my early days, I would think that, this is because I'm still in the early days, so surely we're going to get to a point where we get this teaching. And as time progressed, I realized that, it's not coming. And I would even speak to older students what do you think? Can you see it coming? Whatnot. Nobody was able to give me the answers. And even when I would ask lecturers so how does this identify in darker skin? It was never a uniform answer. Everyone will kind of have their own interpretation. And I knew that this was problematic, because how can each person have their own interpretation of how a condition or disease presents clinically, because as soon as everyone starts leaving it open to interpretation, that's where we start to have like not a set uniform way to identify these things. So I decided to undertake a staff-student partnership at my university, which saw me work with 2 other members of staff to produce Mind the Gap. Mind the Gap, we started producing it in November 2019, and we announced it in June 2020. Since then, the response has been crazy. I think the work has probably been featured on every major news outlet in the world. If I can, or if it's not every, I would say at least 60% of major news outlets in the world have had a feature for Mind the Gap. I think what to expect from the book. I think one thing I always say is that this book is not the finish. It's not like the end, it's the beginning. And I think it's so important that people acknowledge this as the beginning, not the end, because these are problems that people have had for many, many years. And I don't think it can be solved you can't build Rome in a day. However, this book is kind of showing you that, yes, Rome is starting to be built. And it's so important that even the community, as a community, we get together to make sure that we continue to build Rome. And with the work of Mind the Gap, one thing that I really want to make it is as accessible as can be. As of now, Mind the Gap is 100% complete. Everything is ready. Everything is good to go. Following on from Mind the Gap, I have also created a website which will allow for almost an online database of images and different signs and symptoms to be found. It will also have a platform in which users can submit and share their stories, because like you guys said, when you posted it, almost loads of people had a story to tell. And I think one of the problems that is there is those stories are just told almost anecdotally, and there's nowhere to store these stories. So when people who haven't heard this story before hear it, think, oh, it's just one person that's been affected. But I think it's so pivotal to allow these voices, which have almost been silenced for years, to be given a voice. And my attempt at giving them a voice is allowing them to post and share their story completely anonymous on this website, so that others can also see that you're not alone suffering, and we are trying to solve some of the problems. On the picture database, I hope this increases the amount of representation and pictures in darker skins throughout the world, like on the whole internet. I just hope that that's what the website does. And then, of course, we're working on Mind the Gap, 2nd edition. With Mind the Gap, you'll be surprised to hear the amount of people who told me my idea for Mind the Gap was completely ridiculous prior to actually doing the work. And it was those same people that when the work came out were coming to congratulate me, to say, well done for doing it. So I think if there's anybody out there who's looking to make a change, sometimes it's your voice within that will have to be the biggest driving force, because genuinely sometimes people will almost inflict their fears on you. So it's not that you can't do it, but because they are scared that they can't do it too, they will tell you that you can't do it. So it's always important to follow that voice which is inside of you and almost guiding you. Everyone is powerful enough to make a change. Your individuality is so powerful. Like, many people will be dying just to see who you are, like, as an original person, because I feel like the way life is at the moment, we're all kind of rushing to almost fit in. And then what happens with that fitting in process is that everyone then becomes the same, and individuality is almost like suppressed. But when you thrive off your individuality, I feel like people will really almost admire you for that. So it's important just to remain your true self. And lastly, you're never too small to make a change. I say this on every single news source that I've done. You're never too small to make a change. Like, the smallest dominoes can knock over the tallest towers. But the most important part of that process is the first domino has to fall. So you have to actually do stuff to make that first domino fall.